ತುಂಬಾ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇದೆ slides. So we have too many slides. I think 58 slides. If you are not able to complete by 10 o'clock, we will do it in another class.
I thought ಇದು ಸಾಗರ್ ಆಸ್ಟರ್ದು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ನಡೀತಾ ಇತ್ತು. I thought it will take off and probably more and more people will get included.
Correct.
But it is fizzled out.
ಅವರೇ ಬರೋದು ರೀಸನ್ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ರಾ?
ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅವರೇ ಬರೋದು ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಮೇ ಬಿ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಕೋವಿಡ್ ಟೈಮ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇದಾಗ ಲೈಟ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು, ಈಗ ಮತ್ತೆ ಬ್ಯುಸಿ ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ದೇ ಥಾಟ್ ನಾಟ್ ಇದು ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಐ ಟಾಕ್ ಟು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಶಿವರಾಮ್.
Okay. Yes, Pawan, you can start off.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Pawan, second year DMB resident from Sagar Hospitals. Today I am going to discuss on intravenous fluids and different types of IV fluids and their management in different conditions. Fluids and electrolyte management is very important for the care of surgical patients, and there will be change in both fluids and volume and electrolyte composition in perioperative period as well as in response to trauma and sepsis. Whenever there is a fluid deficiency, to maintain fluid balance, fluid therapy is required. When patient is in NPO before surgery and in post-operative condition, and when there is an abnormal blood loss, we will select the type of IV fluids and will maintain the volume and rate of infusion. So water constitutes about 50 to 60% of the total body weight, and it is relatively constant for an individual. The lean tissue such as muscle and solid organs have higher water content when compared to fat and bones. In a young adult, approximately 60% of the total body water constitute in the total body weight, whereas in adult females it is 50% due to their higher percentage of adipose tissue and lower percentage of muscle mass. Highest percentage of total body water is seen in newborns. It is approximately 80%. So the distribution of total body water in various fluid compartments, on an average, then adult male 70 kg, the total body water will be around 42 liters, out of which it is distributed into 1/3 in the extracellular fluid compartment and 2/3 in the intracellular fluid compartment. In extracellular fluid compartment, out of 1/3, 3/4 is interstitial fluid and 1/4 of ECF is plasma or intravascular fluid. Whereas a transcellular fluid is a type of extracellular fluid which is around 0.5 liters. The image in the slide shows water content in different body organs and tissues is seen, and highest body water content is seen in brain. Whereas most of the water in body is intracellular fluid followed by interstitial fluid. Coming to the composition of the fluid compartments, in which the extracellular fluid contains principal cation sodium and anion chloride and bicarbonate, whereas in intracellular fluid the principal cation is potassium and magnesium, and anions are phosphate, sulfate and proteins. Depends upon the concentration gradient between the compartments. It is mainly maintained by sodium and potassium pump, which is located in the cell membrane, and it is ATP driven. Proteins added to the osmolality of the plasma. The physiological activity of electrolytes mainly depends upon the number of particles per unit volume, number of electric charges per unit volume, and number of osmotically active ions per unit volume. So the movement of water across the cell membrane mainly depends upon the primarily on osmosis. To achieve a osmotic equilibrium, water moves across the fluid compartments to maintain the equal concentration gradient on both sides. The concentration of electrolytes is expressed in terms of chemical combining activity or equivalent, right? The equivalence of the atom ions can be calculated by atomic weight divided by its valency. The osmolarity of the solution is assessed. It is amount of solute dissolved in a solvent in 1 kg of solvent, whereas osmolarity is the amount of solute dissolved in 1 liter of solution. Cell membrane are permeable to water.
Go back. Just go back one slide.
Yes, sir.
You just explain the osmolality and osmolarity.
Yes, sir. Sir, in subsequent slides it is coming. Okay. I am simply discussing here the definitions of the osmolarity and osmolality, sir.
Again, just describe that.
Yes,
I think it is a bit confusing.
Okay, sir. So osmolarity means the number of osmotically active particles in 1 kg of solvent we consider, whereas in osmolarity, the number of osmotically active particles in 1 liter of solution, that means it includes both solute and solvents. Okay. The cell membranes are permeable to water. So any change in the osmotic pressure in the fluid compartments is accompanied by distribution of the water until the osmotic pressure between the both compartments is equal. Like if ECF concentration of sodium increases, so there is a net movement of the water from intracellular fluid to extracellular compartment will be seen. Similarly, if ECF concentration of sodium is decreasing, there will be movement of water into the cells. Water is freely diffused.
Wait. Hari has a question.
Yes, sir.
What is the other factor that play a role in movement of water in a cell? Is it only osmotic pressure?
Hydrostatic pressure also, sir.
Hari?
More than that, one factor, it has been already discussed if you remember. So, if movement of water from one area to another, particularly through a cell, one thing which is in between, what divides the movement?
Sir, that is selectively permeable membrane.
Semi-permeable membrane.
Yes,
so
sir.
It can be semi-permeable or fully not permeable or fully permeable. So that
Yes,
also
sir.
decides the movement of water through the cell. And
Yes,
also osmosis, like you say, other the Stirling process, etc. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any PGs, any other questions till now? Okay, Pawan, continue. I don't think there is any.
So, movement of ions and proteins between the various fluid compartments is restricted, but water is freely diffusible. The water is evenly distributed in all fluid compartments of the body, and sodium is confined to the extracellular compartment and remains associated with the water. Sodium containing fluids are distributed throughout the ECF and adds the volume of both plasma and interstitial fluids. So osmotic pressure is measured in terms of osmoles or milliosmoles. The principal determinants of plasma osmolality are concentrations of sodium, glucose, and urea, and it is calculated through the given formula. Hence, the normal plasma osmolarity is 275 to 295 milliosmoles per kg. The table in the slide shows exchange of water through various sensible and insensible routes on an average daily basis, in which the sensible water gains through oral fluids and solid fluids, and insensible water gain through oxidation of water. Similarly, sensible water losses will be through urine, intestine, and sweat, and insensible water losses through lungs and skin. So disturbance in the fluid balances like volume deficit. Extracellular fluid volume is the most common disorder seen in surgical patients, and decrease in the whole body fluid volume, which includes both ECF and ICF, And the signs and symptoms of volume deficit can be weight loss, decreased skin turgor, tachycardia, hypotension, oliguria, and ileus. Usually, ECF loss will be more important and it should be assessed. It can be isotonic volume depletion with both salt and water loss leading to hypovolemia, or only water loss with minimal loss of electrolytes leading to dehydration. Isotonic volume depletion occurs due to diarrhea, vomiting, and excess diuresis. Fluid loss is only of ECF, so early intravascular volume reduction occurs, and hypotension and decreased tissue perfusion will be there. Depends upon the fluid loss, the hypovolemia can be graded into mild, moderate, and severe. Only pure water loss occurs due to poor fluid intake and diabetes insipidus and causes dehydration proportionate to decrease in the total body water, and the symptoms like severe thirst, confusion, and convulsion due to hypernatremia. The dehydration can be mild, moderate, and severe, depends upon the volume deficit. Like volume deficit, volume excess conditions in which both plasma and interstitial volumes usually are increased, that leads to signs and symptoms like weight gain, peripheral edema, and increased cardiac output, increased central venous pressure, and bowel edema and pulmonary edema. The symptoms are primarily pulmonary edema and the cardiovascular symptoms. If patient is fit and tolerated edema and hyperdynamic circulation, whereas in elderly and in cardiac patients, they quickly develop the congestive heart failure and pulmonary edema in response to moderate volume excess. The volume excess can be divided into water and salt excess or water intoxication. The water and salt excess conditions seen in CCF, cirrhosis, nephrotic syndrome, hypoproteinemia, renal failure, or excessive saline infusion. Whereas water intoxication occurs in TURP, excess infusion of 5% dextrose, and psychogenic polydipsia and SAADH.
Why water intoxication occurs in TURP, Pawan? What is the cause?
Sir, in in TURP, sir, they usually connect 2.5% to 1.5% glycine. They will connect, sir, continuously, so that it is a hypotonic solution, which causes inward movement of the fluid into the cells, sir, net movement into the cells.
Sir, if I may tell, sir.
No hurry, yeah.
Pawan, you have clearly mentioned water and salt excess means both water and also sodium. Okay. But water intoxication means only water. If you can see the difference, SAADH means there is no disturbances in the sodium. Only water is retented. Okay. Taken inside. And even if you say excessive infusion of 5% dextrose, 5% dextrose doesn't have sodium or anything, only water and sugar. Likewise, TURP doesn't involve with your sodium or something. It is more amount of fluid what you're for dilution using, it is entering into the system because of coagulation, bleeding, etc. is there. No, the vessels are not coagulated, so it comes inside your system. That is the main thing here, water intoxication, more than what you said. But on the other side, water and salt excess, you can see renal failure, etc. Both water and sodium is also retained. Okay, there is a difference.
Okay, go on, continue.
So volume changes are sensed by both osmoreceptors and baroreceptors. The osmoreceptors are the specialized sensors. They can detect even in the small changes in the fluid osmolarity. They driven changes in the thirst and diuresis through kidney. When the plasma osmolarity is increased, so there is an increase in thirst is stimulated and water consumption also increases. Additionally, hypothalamus stimulates to secrete vasopressin, which causes increased water reabsorption to the kidneys.
Pawan, Where does the ADH act?
Sir, that is collecting duct, sir.
Collecting system. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Correct. Yes, pa. Continue.
Baroreceptors, which are located in the aortic arch and the carotid sinus, also modulate volume in response to changes in the pressure and circulating volume. Their response is through neurally through sympathetic and parasympathetic pathways, and hormonally through renin-angiotensin mechanism and renal prostaglandins and ANP. The net result is alteration in the renal sodium excretion, free water resorption of volume to the normal state. The principles of fluid therapy.
Pawan,
Sir,
you said, go back to the slide. You said baroreceptor changes also increases the aldosterone secretion, renin-angiotensin
Yes, sir.
aldosterone. So what does that do?
renin-angiotensin mechanism, they causes sodium and water resorption, sir. That leads to increased intravascular compartment fluid volume, sir.
But you said
And maintaining blood pressure, sir. Then.
But you said it causes sodium excretion and free water absorption. In the next sentence.
Yes, sir.
They are contradictory, because so aldosterone does not act purely on water. It acts on water through sodium. So because sodium is absorbed, water is also absorbed.
Absorbed, yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Continue.
The indications for fluid therapy for rapid restoration of the fluids and electrolytes in conditions like dehydration due to vomiting, diarrhea, and shock due to hemorrhage or sepsis or burns. The total parenteral nutrition, and in anaphylactic condition, cardiac arrest, and in conditions like hypoxia and post-gastrointestinal surgeries, and to maintain fluid therapy and replacement of lost fluids from the body.
1 minute. Go back.
Yes, sir.
Under what broad categories you mention the indications for fluid therapy? What are the three? There are three major indications. Then there is one more minor. You have just described total parenteral anaphylaxis and all that. Under
Yes.
what broad headings do you do that? There is one heading which I can see, two headings which I can see.
I didn't get it, sir. Maintenance and fluid replacement.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Maintenance one, fluid
sir.
replacement one. What is the other one? Hari or Indraja?
Janani, are you not there?
Yes, sir, I'm here, sir.
You're not participating. You're sitting like a mummy.
Indraja,
I'm listening.
he said maintenance, replacement.
Yes, sir.
There is one more broad heading. Janani,
Sir, maintenance, restoration.
he has already mentioned maintenance and replacement. There is one more thing.
No, sir, I'm not
What
sure.
you will do in shock?
Sir,
In the first line.
Is it
it is there.
resuscitation, sir?
Yeah,
Resuscitation.
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 Okay. What are the differences major? Hari, what
Sorry,
is
sir?
resuscitation? What is resuscitation?
Resuscitation, we should calculate immediately about the
No,
patient
what do you
loss.
mean by resuscitation? What do you do there?
Resuscitation,
What do you do there?
we maintain the vitals, sir, mainly.
No,
To maintain the BP.
resuscitation fluids
In
are
resuscitation,
basically
give
yeah.
bolus IV fluids in a large bore cannula.
No,
we
no.
should,
Why? What does it? What does it do? Why do you
because
resuscitate?
being in shock due to hypovolemia or something. So we
Correct.
should replace the fluid.
Fluid loss.
We should resuscitation fluids are basically used to correct a intravascular volume deficit or acute hypovolemia. Okay. What do you do in
Okay.
replacement? What is replacement?
Replacement is based on the what loss he has, sir. So we have to replace accordingly. How much he
Okay, that is
fluid is
to
required.
That is either, that is one part is correct, that is to correct existing losses, or which you anticipate anything which can developing deficits also can be compensated. So what is this one then? Maintenance.
Maintenance, for example, post surgery will be nil per oral. So according to what requirement is there, we have to maintain sodium and glucose, etc. For example, our ringer's latate
Requirements
and
of water and
5%.
electrolytes. Daily requirement of water and electrolytes when patient is nil orally. Okay. Is there any other indication? These are the three broad headings. Anyone?
Hari,
Sir, yes, sir.
you keep on saying nil orally. Where do we keep patients nil orally, man? See, the enhanced recovery program, you don't keep patients nil orally.
No, sir. In GI surgeries, I mean, for example, one day like that.
No. See, the thing is, you have to understand the maintenance therapy is to give what you deem necessary for the body, imagining that whatever orally they are taking is insufficient to meet their daily demands.
Yes, sir.
And also, there is suspicion about the amount that is absorbed, because in case there is a bit of ileus or whatever, the patient, the absorption may not be constant and consistent. So you presume what is the daily requirement for the patient according to their body weight, and give that volume, because body is anyway capable of excreting excessive fluid if you have given excess. So that is why that is maintenance therapy. So it's not meaning that you are keeping the patient nil by mouth.
Okay. Sir, if we can, don't doubt, sir, if we can add one more thing to that, sir. If the patient, for example, in coma or intubated, we are giving TPN with IV fluid. So that we can call as also maintenance, sir, or that should not be called, sir. Like we
that is replacement. You're replacing.
Okay, sir. Fine, sir. Okay. That is replacement. Okay.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. That is got
one more indication. What is fluid creep? There is something called as fluid creep. Anybody? When you administered IV fluids for diluting the drugs, okay, and also you just give fluids to maintain the patency of the catheter. That is called as fluid creep. Okay, so these are the major four broad indications under which the IV fluids are given. Fluid therapy is given. Yes, go on, continue.
Hari, what is the, I think Niranjan made a very good point. What is the significance of fluid creep?
Sir, for diluting, maybe thrombophlebitis or reading, like I'm not sure, sir.
No. See, basically, especially in patients who have cardiac problems, ischemic heart disease, congestive heart failure, you have to take into consideration the amount of fluid you are giving as fluid creep, because they cannot, handle excessive fluid. So, in other people, you don't have to worry about it. But in patients who have, either CCF, fluid overload is significant, and patients who have lung problems, you don't want to give them interstitial edema. So you have to take into consideration, because, for example, if you are giving 2 or 3 antibiotics, each one 100 ml, and so 2 or 3 times a day, that will amount to almost a liter. So you have to take into consideration when you are giving these fluids. Okay, that is the importance of fluid creep.
Okay.
Yes, Pawan, continue.
Yes. The problems in the fluid therapy, it requires hospitalization, and they should be transfused in a aseptic precaution. If the fluids are given in excess, which may lead to fluid overload, pulmonary edema, and cardiac failure conditions. And if it is performed under aseptic, not in a aseptic precaution manner, it may lead to infections. And if the canalization and all not done properly, it may lead to local infections like cellulitis and hematoma and thrombophlebitis. And it also causes pyrogenic reactions and air embolism and bacteremia. And it is also discomfort for the patient. minute, sir. Um,
Yes, Pawan, what happened?
Sir, 1 minute, sir.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
Go carry on.
Carry on, continue. What happened?
Sir. Yes, sir. So coming to the various type of IV fluids which are used in clinical practice, and they are broadly classified into crystalloids, colloids, and blood groups. So coming to the crystalloids, these are the solutions contains small molecules that can be easily passed through the cell membranes, allowing for the transfer from bloodstream into the cells and to the body tissues. And this increases fluid in both interstitial as well as in the intravascular spaces. The IV fluids are subdivided into isotonic fluids, hypertonic fluids, and hypotonic fluids. The isotonic fluids are 0.9% NaCl, Ringer lactate solution, 5% dextrose in water, and Ringer solution. All these isotonic fluids have same isotonicity as intracellular fluids, and there won't be any fluid shift, and mainly used for fluid replacement therapy. So 0.9% NaCl, so it is called as normal saline solution, and it contains sodium and chloride having a osmolarity of around 308 milliosmoles. And the percentage of sodium and chloride in the solution is similar to the concentration of sodium and chloride in the intravascular space. The indications for the normal saline is, so whenever there is a fluid deficit conditions like extracellular fluid deficient conditions like hemorrhage, severe vomitings or diarrhea, heavy drainage from the GI section, fistulas or wounds, and in conditions like shock, mild hyponatremia, mild alkalosis like vomiting, and it is the fluid of choice for the resuscitation efforts. The 0.9% NaCl replaces extracellular fluid, and it should be cautionally given in the cardiac and renal patients, which may lead to fluid overload conditions. Ringer lactate solution, which is also called as Hartmann solution, and most physiologically adaptable fluid because its electrolyte content is most closely related to the body, serum, and plasma. And it is the another fluid of choice for resuscitation in patients such as in burnt injuries. It is indicated to replace GI tract fluid losses, and it is the initial fluid choice for the treatment of diarrhea-induced dehydration. And it is also used in fluid losses through fistulas and fluid losses due to burns and trauma, and patient experienced acute blood loss or hypovolemia due to third space fluid shifts. In the both 0.9% NaCl and RL, they can be used in clinical situations, but patients requiring electrolyte replacement in which RL is more beneficial than the 0.9% NaCl.
Pawan, go back.
Yes, sir.
Indraja, go back.
Yes.
Indraja,
Yes,
name
sir.
a condition where there will be third space fluid shift, hypovolemia, due to that.
Sir, in peritoneal space, sir.
No. Name give few
Okay.
examples.
Okay.
No or don't know.
You don't have to think so much, ma.
No, sir.
Blood loss, acute blood loss conditions.
No, where is fluid
Acute blood loss,
shifting?
where is fluid shift? Third place.
Come on, man.
Yes.
Janani, if you don't answer this question, I will not let you take the theory tomorrow.
Sir, in cases like pancreatitis,
Correct.
Correct.
yes, sir.
And
Then
what else? Do we treat regularly, no?
Yes, sir, and also
To name two other emergencies that we treat, then you will be correct.
some blockade somewhere.
Come on, man.
In-
Think this very simple question. I thought Niranjan was asking very simple question, but it
That's
doesn't
why I
seem to
also
be.
thought everybody will answer.
Congestive cardiac failure.
Sir, intestinal obstruction, sir,
Correct.
cardiac
Correct.
failure, cirrhosis.
Cardiac failure, where is fluid? This one, third spacing.
Third spacing will not happen in CCF.
So cirrhosis, sir, acid and this thing. Low albumin conditions, sir. Hello, can you hear me, sir?
See, peritonitis,
Peritonitis and intestinal
obstruction,
Intestinal obstruction.
and pancreatitis.
Yes, sir.
pancreatitis.
These are three surgical conditions. Maybe CCF, liver failure, renal failure, it may happen, but that is in the later stages only.
Yes, sir.
Actually, it is called fourth spacing rather than third spacing, because significant amount of fluid is not in the cavities but in the interstitial tissue.
Issues.
That is why it's called fourth spacing.
Continue.
Hello. Hello.
Sir, yes,
Sir,
sir.
they were mentioning CCF and the ascites due to cirrhosis. Actually, in those conditions, Ringer's lactate and NS are contraindicated, sir. So they are not considered under this heading.
Yeah.
In CCF, if you give NaCl, saline or Ringers, they will have aggravation of the condition. Actually,
Correct,
they give
correct.
diuretics.
Diuretics, yeah.
Correct.
So this doesn't come under this third space. Third space, as you mentioned, peritonitis, intestinal obstruction, and pancreatitis. Those are the things.
Correct.
Continue, Pawan.
Yes. So RL is mainly metabolized in the liver. In liver, it converts lactate to bicarbonates, and it is usually administered in patients who have metabolic acidosis, and should not be given in patients with the liver diseases in which they can't metabolize lactate.
So this is the answer. You should not use RL in
Liver
Cirrhosis.
disease,
patient.
cirrhosis
Yeah, liver.
patient.
Correct.
And you should be cautionally given in the severe renal impairment patients because it contains potassium. And RL should not be given to the patients in whom the pH is more than 7.5.
Why? Pawan?
Sir, because the lactate is converted into bicarbonate, sir. So it further causes metabolic alkalosis.
Correct. Okay.
Correct. So it's a fluid of choice in treating patients with metabolic acidosis.
Yes, sir. Like Ringer lactate solution, Ringer solution, the contents of sodium, potassium, and calcium and chloride are similar in equivalents, but it does not contain lactate. So the Ringer solution is used in similar fashion, but it don't have any contraindications related to lactate.
So this can be used in
Cirrhosis of liver and
correct.
yes.
In out of interest, does anyone know who Ringer was? Ringer was actually a surgeon physiologist. So he actually found a lot of the fluid electrolyte management that we do today is because of him. The physicians claim that they know a lot about these things, but a lot of good things that has happened with the fluid electrolyte balance is come from surgeons. So if anyone taunts you, you tell them whatever we know today is because of surgeons, not because of physicians. Okay, continue.
Yes. The 5% dextrose water solution contains dextrose of 50 grams per liter, having a osmolarity of 278 milliosmoles per liter, and it is considered as a isotonic solution, and it is where the dextrose is metabolized, and the solution becomes hypotonic, which causes shift of the fluid into the cells. The dextrose solution provides free water that passes through the membrane pores to both intracellular and extracellular spaces. Because of its smaller size, the molecules passes more freely between the compartments and thus expanding both compartments simultaneously. It has a little, it provides a little calories like 170 calories per liter, but it does not replace any electrolytes. So the supplied calories do not provide enough nutrition for prolonged usage. So, but still can be added to provide some calories while the patient is in NPO in preoperatively or in post-operative conditions. But dextrose, 5% dextrose water is not good for the patients in renal failure patients and also patients having cardiac conditions. It could cause fluid overload. And the patients at risk of for intracranial pressure, and the dextrose 5% dextrose water should be avoided, which causes cerebral edema.
Why does it cause cerebral edema?
Sir, when it is metabolized, so it becomes hypotonic, no, sir. So that the fluid from the vascular compartment enters into the cell, so that it leads
Extracellular.
to cerebral edema.
Correct. Why? Because brain only uses
Glucose, sir.
glucose. Okay, good.
5% dextrose water should not be used in isolation to treat fluid volume deficit condition. It dilutes plasma electrolyte concentrations. So you should not be mix dextrose with blood, as it causes hemolysis of the blood. And it should not be used for resuscitation because the solution won't remain in the intravascular space. And you should not be used in early post-operative period also, because a body reaction to surgical stress may cause an increase in the antidiuretic hormone secretion.
Pawan, is it like completely contraindicated? 5% dextrose.
Sir, not like that, sir. So we have to see the caloric requirement of the patient pre-operatively also, sir. So depends
But
upon the
early
No.
post-op, you are telling no, but what will be the nutrition if you saying it should not be put? That's my question.
we can connect DNS, sir.
You can
Hari,
connect. Yes, sir.
any of the fluids that you give, they are not consideration as nutrition at all. So your
Okay, sir.
question that way is invalid, because
Okay, sir.
whatever fluid you are giving, it hardly gives any calories at all. So I don't think calorific value of the fluid is of negligible, nature.
It is more
Yes.
for the replacement of water and electrolytes if required, if at all, not for
So-
calories.
So, but what was
But,
the purpose of your question?
No, sir. I thought the glucose is there. So he's selling completely contraindicated. So that's what I asked. So can be given like sir post-operatively dextrose. So I was thinking whether we can give dextrose post-operatively because of the glucose when compared to other. So we rotate with like ringer lactate and 5% dextrose sometimes. So that's why the question is it completely contraindicated or what he's telling? I want to know.
No, I don't think it's completely
Hmm.
It is not
contraindicated.
completely contraindicated.
You
Okay,
should
sir.
understand what you are doing. That's all. That is what his
Okay.
purpose was. You should understand what are you trying to do by giving 5% dextrose. So in specific circumstances, you should try and avoid it because of the problems he has enlisted. So I think it's
Okay.
not completely contraindicated.
Okay, sir.
Sir, can I continue?
Yeah. Continue.
Yes, sir. So the image in the slide shows different types of isolates and their electrolytes composition and their osmolality as shown in the table. Coming to the isolate G, it is mainly used in the gastric replacement solutions and also in upper GI losses, in which the ammonium is converted into urea and hydrogen ion in the liver. It is mainly used in vomiting or nasogastric tube induced hypokalemic metabolic alkalosis, and it contraindicated in the hepatic failure, renal failure, and severe vomiting with shock and severe uncontrolled metabolic acidosis. Isolatium, it is a fluid for maintenance and helps in the correction of hypokalemia states, and it is richest in potassium around 35 milliequivalents per liter. It is contraindicated in renal failure, burns, and adenocorticotropic hormone insufficiencies. And isolate P, mainly used in pediatric patients as they require more water and less electrolytes. Excess water loss or inability to concentrate the urine, and contraindicated in hyponatremia conditions and in renal failure conditions. Isolate E is a extracellular replacement solution. It contains additionally potassium and acetate around 47 milliequivalents per liter. It is the only IV fluid helps in magnesium deficiency, correct the magnesium deficiency, and is used to treat diarrhea and metabolic acidosis. And it is contraindicated in metabolic alkalosis. Coming to the hypotonic fluids, like 0.45% NaCl, 0.33% NaCl, 0.2% NaCl, and 2.5% dextrose in water. The hypotonic fluids are used to treat the patient in conditions causing intracellular dehydration, in which need to shift the fluid into the cells, such as conditions like hypernatremia, diabetic ketoacidosis, and hyperosmolar hyperglycemic states. While giving hypotonic fluids, the precaution should be we should not give hypotonic solutions to the patients who are at a risk of increased intracranial pressure, because it may aggravate the cerebral edema, and we should not use hypotonic solutions in patients like liver diseases, trauma, or burns due to the potential depletion of the intravascular fluid volume, and which leads to hypovolemia and hypotension, and further causes cardiovascular collapse. And monitoring the patient through the signs and symptoms of the fluid through volume deficit conditions, and in an older adult patient, confusion may be as an indicator of the fluid volume deficit. The hypertonic fluid conditions like 3% NaCl, 5% NaCl, and 5% dextrose with normal saline. The solutions having hypertonicity, that means solute concentration is high when compared to plasma. So it is around 375 milliosmolars or higher. So the osmotic pressure gradients draw water from the intracellular space, increasing the extracellular volume, and it causes, which relieves the cellular edema. The 3% NaCl having 513 millimoles per liter of sodium and chloride each, and having an osmolarity of 0.1026 milliosmoles. And it should be prescribed in the critical situations in severe hyponatremia conditions and patients with cerebral edema. It may be beneficial from an infusion of the hypertonic sodium chloride solution. 5% dextrose with normal saline, it replaces sodium chloride and some calories.
What is the problem with infusing hypertonic saline? How should it be given?
Sir, it should be diluted and it should be monitored.
No
Yes,
dilution.
That means slowly we have to give, sir.
So you have to infuse it slowly. No, what is the point of diluting it? Because you are trying to give hypertonic saline.
Yes,
so
sir.
Don't dilute it, but give it slowly. Why?
Sir, it may, on rapid infusion, it may cause demyelination of the.
Correct. Demyelination, spontaneous hemorrhage.
Yes, sir.
So these are, so you have to be very careful. Give it slowly. Okay, continue.
The precautions we have to follow while giving hypertonic fluids, like we should be administered with constant nursing surveillance for potential complications, and maintenance when administering hypertonic solution because of their potential causing intravascular fluid overload and pulmonary edema. And you should not be given for indefinite periods of time, and it is better to store hypertonic solutions apart from regular stock IV fluids. So coming to the colloid solutions, it is used in surgical patients as their effectiveness as a volume expanders compared with the isotonic crystalloids. These are having high molecular weight. They are conformed to the intravascular space. So their infusion is more efficiently transient plasma volume expansion. The higher molecular weight agents flux capillary leaks, which occurs during neutrophil mediated organ injury, but it is not yet confirmed. So four major types of colloids are albumin, dextran, heterostarch, and gelatins. Colloid solutions with smaller particles and low molecular weights exert greater oncotic pressure. So albumin having a molecular weight of around 70 to 70,000, and it is prepared from the heat sterilized pooled human plasma, and it is available either in 5% solution having a osmolarity of 300 milliosmoles per liter, and also in 25% solution having a osmolarity of 1500 milliosmoles per liter. So it is a derivative of blood, so it should be associated with some allergic reactions. It should be shown to induce renal failure and impair pulmonary functions when used for resuscitation in hemorrhagic shock. The indications of albumin like plasma volume expansion in acute hypovolemic shock, burns, and severe hypoalbuminemia, and hypoproteinemia, liver diseases, and diuretic resistant nephrotic syndrome, oliguria, and therapeutic plasmapheresis as an exchange fluid. And it is contraindicated in severe anemia, cardiac failure, and in hypersensitivity conditions. Coming to dextrans and gelatin, these are polymers produced by the bacteria growth on the sucrose medium and are available either in 40,000 or 70,000 molecular weight solutions. So they primarily to lower the blood viscosity rather than volume expanders. The dextran has been used in association with hypertonic saline to maintain intravascular volume. Gelatins are the fourth group of colloids, and it is produced from the bovine collagen, and it is of two types, mainly that is urea linked gelatin and succinylated gelatin. Many other artificial plasma volume expanders has been shown to impair whole body coagulation time in human volunteers. So these are the various differences present between advantages and the disadvantages of the crystalloids and colloids. Coming to the advantages of the crystalloids, it is cheap and it is non-allergic and no transmission of infection and no interference with the coagulation. The disadvantages of the crystalloids are having higher volumes are needed and relatively shorter amount of time is remaining in the intravascular space. Coming to the colloids, the advantages of colloids are they increases the plasma volume and maybe salt sparing. But the disadvantages is it is expensive, may cause some coagulopathic reactions and allergic reactions, and may exacerbate tissue edema.
Just a minute.
Fluid therapy. Yes, sir.
Hari, what is your this one view on colloid versus crystalloid? Is there still a debate or is it been put to rest?
Sir, I think crystalloids are better only. So I think it is still in debate, but I'm not sure. But crystalloids is better, I think.
Janani?
So crystalloids are right option, sir. For resuscitation and for all emergencies, crystalloids are better. And when we compare the cost also, crystalloids are much more cheaper than colloids.
Abdul?
So
it is easily available, sir.
Abdul? Is Abdul there or not?
Sir, the role of colloid has limited nowadays.
Yeah.
It's only used in some rare situations like acute burns. But majority of the time it's the crystalloid which are being used.
So the debate about crystalloids versus colloid has been put to rest. Crystalloids are the more preferred options in most situations. In as Abdul said, in probably in very selective situations, as I think they used in one of our patients. You may use colloids, but by and large, especially in trauma and things, crystalloids first, then give components either in the form of packed cell blood or packed cells RBCs, and then maybe some if there is coagulation, you give them FFP and things like that. So by and large, colloids use has been restricted for various reasons. Niranjan?
Yes, sir, I agree. Totally agree.
Ramakrishna, sir?
Yes, sir. Colloids are not much used nowadays, and most of the literature says crystalloids should be used because sometimes even renal problems also occurs, and coagulopathies, and even in acute blood loss, if blood is not available, the first choice would be normal saline or ringers.
Correct. So
I think we have to give some 1:3 means 1 liter blood loss. If you estimate, you have to give 3 liters.
correct.
This because it is more fluid is required to replace the blood.
Correct. So basically, see, you can, with colloids, you may have some potential problems in terms of renal problems, in terms of coagulation. So you're adding to the already delicate balance. So just use crystalloids, and whenever blood is indicated, use packed cells and plasma as and when required. Okay, continue, Pawan.
Yes, sir. So, fluid therapy in various surgical patients, preoperatively, it is used to correction of the hypovolemia. If hypovolemia is uncorrected, it is compensated by increased vascular resistance and increased heart rate through normal baroreceptor reflexes. The rough guidelines for the preoperative fluid deficits, like if it is a mild dehydration, 4% of the body weight fluid deficit will be there. Moderate dehydration, around 6 to 8% body weight fluid deficit, whereas in severe dehydration, around 10% of body weight fluid deficit. So, for example, in case of 50 kg patient, around 5 liter fluid deficit will be there if it is a severe dehydration. The causes of hypotension intraoperatively will be loss of fluid, fluid depletion or thought space loss, and vasodilatory effect of the anesthetic agents, and spinal and epidural anesthesia. Usually, IV fluids like Ringer lactate is used most physiological, and composition it is similar to body fluids. If oral is contraindicated, then you can use isotonic saline. In case of starvation periods, 5% dextrose as an initial fluid of replacement. A rapid replacement with dextrose containing fluid should not be done because it causes hyperglycemia, glycosuria with osmotic diuresis. So 3 major components intraoperatively in fluid management is in fluid deficit. When the patient is in NPO, the patient is in volume deficient condition. So classically, the calculation like 4:1 calculation we follow, 4:1 rule. That is, for first 10 kgs body weight, 4 cc per kg volume we have to calculate, and for the next 10 kgs, 2 cc per kg body weight, and for remaining body weight, 1 cc per kg body weight. And it is used in the patients for maintaining maintenance requirement per hour. In a case of in a patient having 70 kg, it should be 110 cc per hour. So, and so multiply, that means the 110 cc is multiplied with the number of the hours the patient is on NPO. So if the patient is around 10 hours of NPO, then it is around 1.1 liters. The patient is in fluid deficient condition, out of which 50% of it should be replaced in first hour of the surgery with the crystalloids, and 25% in second hour, and remaining 25% in third hour. The maintenance is similar to that calculation, that is 4:1 rule replaces maintenance requirement each hour. Ongoing losses, in terms of things we can see, and in longer cases, routinely measured estimated blood loss, and by examination surgical fluid field and sponges and suction and canisters, replace blood 1:1 with colloid or 3:1 with crystalloids, and the urine output should be accordingly 0.5 cc per kg per hour at a minimum in adult. Insensible losses which are difficult to calculate. So evaporating losses from surgical site, or if there is any thought space fluid loss, as a inflammatory response, we have to estimate the fluid loss as if there is a minimal tissue trauma during surgery. We have to give around 2 to 4 cc per kg per hour fluid infusion. If it is a moderate tissue trauma like in cholecystectomy, around 4 to 6 cc per kg per hour we have to infuse. Whereas in severe trauma cases like bowel dissections, around 6 to 8 ml per kg per hour we have to infuse. Depends upon the yes,
Wait, how many more slides?
sir, around 5 slides, sir.
Only 5 slides. Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
shall we finish it off, sir?
Yeah. Please continue.
Okay. Go on, continue.
Yes, sir. Depends upon the type of surgery, whether it is major or minor, or nature of the surgery, like bowel surgery or any limb surgery. The patient should be subjected to some shorter operative periods. If we are not handling the viscera, it requires maintenance IV fluids because of the NPO states. Whereas in major surgeries, where some intestinal surgeries, it requires IV fluids needed for around 24 to 48 hours. For major resections like intestinal resections with anastomosis and colectomies, where intestinal viscera need rest, so post-operative IV fluids is for few days.
No. See, go back. Just go back. See, where is the NPO status, man? You are now giving 2 hours before. We have to give carbohydrate load for the patients. Clear fluids with carbohydrate-rich clear fluids, which is given. So there is no NPO at all. So all this, this is all bagwas. Basically, all these things have altered since enhanced recovery program has come in. Even if you don't completely, enact or introduce enhanced recovery program, lot of the offshoots of enhanced recovery programs have actually happened. For example, you don't put a nasogastric tube, you don't put drains, you don't starve the patients, you give them carbohydrate load 2 hours before surgery, you restrict the amount of fluid that you give. In major surgeries, you give them avoid using opioid analgesia, give them epidural analgesia, allow the patient to mobilize, and then post-operatively within as far I think as far as I'm concerned, you can start feeding them as soon as the patient is completely awake. So this business of NPO and bowel rest, all these things are bagwas. Only in patients who have peritonitis, bowel obstruction, where the bowel is very dilated and edematous, and patient who has severe peritonitis where bowel is all thickened and filled, covered with inflammatory exudate and fibrinous exudate, where the bowel will take some time. Only in such patients these things are applicable. In routine, in most of our routine patients, these things are not applicable. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, sir. So before prescribing the IV fluids, one should always consider the age of the patient and weight of the patient and hydration status and the urine output, the preoperative diagnosis and nature of surgery and the amount of blood loss during surgery, nature and volume of the fluid and blood replaced intraoperatively, and in case of some bowel surgeries or if there is any drain, amount of the drain output and NG feed, NG aspiration, fluid loss at the operative and wound site. Renal status and associated comorbidities also should be considered. Sir, actually, you don't know, sir, now NPU, that ERAS program. Sir, this is given in that anesthesia that initially in first 24 hours of surgery. 2 liters with 5% dextrose or 1.5 liters with 5% dextrose and around 500 ml of isotonic solution should be used. And in second post-operative day, 2 liters of 5% dextrose with 1 liter of 0.9% normal saline is used. And in third post-operative day, along with the fluids, we have to give around 40 to 60 milliequivalents of potassium per day.
No, why are you waiting till third day to give potassium?
I have the doubt.
See, what is the restriction that happens with ADH and all that? With ADH, renin, angiotensin, aldosterone. It is actually the potassium that is affected more than sodium. So you have to start replacing potassium from day 0.
Yes, sir.
The normal requirement is about 60 to 80 millimoles in a 70 kg man. So, or man or a woman. So you give them normal replacement. If you feel that there is any loss, or if potassium, when it is measured, it is 3.1 or 3, then for every 0.1 deficit in the normal, in the potassium value, you add 10 millimoles. So which, for example, in this case 3, if it is 3, you have to add another 50 millimoles. So that, you have to give potassium from day 0 if it is indicated. And I think the concept of obligatory underhydration has come in, and it has been proven to be beneficial. Or if you want to, this one really a goal directed therapy where you maintain mean arterial pressure at between 70 to 80 millimeters of mercury, heart rate about 80 to 100, and with that, you by and large give between 70 to 100 ml of fluid per hour. So which will amount to between 1.5 to 2 liters per day. So that is the amount of fluid that you give, because there is retention of water due to ADH and corticosteroids and all the emergency hormones, the catecholamines and everything. All of them cause fluid retention. So you don't need to give too much fluid. And from day 2 and day 3, what happens is the fluid starts getting remobilized and the urine output will increase. So don't chase urine output on day 2 and 3, because it is all the excessive fluid that has been given already. So again, the main thing is you have to talk to your anesthetist and make sure that they don't unnecessarily give too much fluid. Previously the practice was, as soon as one bag is finished, you start putting up another bag. So that doesn't happen and should not happen anymore. So you have to monitor, and you don't need more than 30 to 50 ml of urine per hour. So you have to restrict the amount of fluids that is given. As I keep telling, there are many advantages. One is it reduces the edema, allows the patient in the periphery, allows the patient to mobilize well. It reduces the edema in the lung, allows the patient to breathe well and improves the oxygenation. And it reduces the bowel edema and it reduces the chances of ileus. So these are the advantages of restricting the IV fluids. So all this, I don't know where you got this from. It's all bagwas. So you have to, the current recommendation is obligatory underhydration. You only give fluid if the patient is hypotensive and things like that. You react to the patient's condition. Otherwise, as a rule of the thumb, fluid should be restricted. Niranjan?
I totally agree with Ravi Shankar sir. I had just purposefully kept this slide on because he had copied it from a book.
Correct.
I told him to do some research and put it from review articles. I've shared a nice article in the Sagar Aster group, a recommendation from the International Fluid Academy, current recommendations.
Correct.
So if you people can go through that, you will find answers for what sir is talking about. So now the concept is obligatory under hydration rather than over hydration. Okay, that concept is given up now, almost given up now. So that's why I was insisting with Pawan to whenever you present for a subject seminar, please everybody reads the textbooks and these kind of books. But the current recommendations you will get it only in research papers or review articles. So
Actually,
please make it a habit to search for review articles and give the current evidence.
Dr. Lakshman keeps saying, textbooks are for undergraduates. Postgraduates,
And whatever the data will be there in textbooks, it will be invariably 4 or 5 years old.
See, there is a brilliant article in New England Journal of Medicine from the University of Nottingham, Dilip Raj Lobo, who was my contemporary from St. John's. And that is very brilliantly elucidated the concept of obligatory underhydration. See, the concept has all the needle has shifted towards under hydration, under nutrition, and even in terms of blood transfusion, you don't unnecessarily transfuse blood unless it is absolutely necessary. So as we know that if the patient is hemodynamically stable, if the hemoglobin is less than 6, only then unstable, less than 6, you transfuse them. 6 to 8, you can wait and watch. In patients who have cardiac problems, you transfuse if their hemoglobin is less than 10. So this is the rule of the thumb. Previously, everybody used to get transfusion, so you don't transfuse. Again, nutrition wise, previously they would give 2.5, 3,500, 4,500 calories, especially in patients who were, hypercatabolic and, catabolic because of the sepsis or trauma and everything. And it just fueled more problems. So now this concept is you give them about, the 25 to 30 kilocalories per kg, which will be between 1,500 to 2,000 calories per day. That is enough to maintain the nutritional status of the patient. And as and when the patient gets better, he will start eating. And see, once you eat normally, then you will get better. So you don't have to chase any of these things. So the concept is going under rather than going over.
And there is one more concept called ROSE, okay, where they 4 phases of fluid therapy, that is resuscitation, optimization, stabilization, and evacuation. Okay, so all of you please go through that article which I have put it up. That is a current recommendation from the International Fluid Academy.
I think that is very good, Niranjan. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir.
Sir, I think what he has put is those patients who are kept nilvarally for more than 3 days. For some reason, maybe GJ and patient developed paralytic ileus or something, any reason, if patient is kept nilvarally for more than 3 days, then potassium replacement will be required from 3rd day onwards. First 2 days, body will maintain itself. So we don't need to give potassium there. But from 3rd day onwards, if patient is kept nilvarally, I think we have to replace potassium, sir.
But potassium is never, the problem is there is no hormone that is actually trying to save potassium. All the hormones are actually trying to get rid of potassium. So you will have to start giving potassium from day 0. That is my contention. Because if you look at the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone axis, all of them will conserve sodium at the cost of potassium. Same with ADH. Same with the glucocorticoids as well. So ultimately, there is no mechanism which actually conserves potassium. So unless the patient's potassium is 5 or renal failure and other things, you have to start supplementing potassium from day 0. But you don't have to give, go wild about it. 60 to 80 millimoles over a period of 24 hours is sufficient. But your point that it has to be, supplemented more,
given from 3rd day,
invariably
body will be able to sustain what, that is what Ramakrishna sir is telling, and I probably it's correct also.
Yeah.
That's what, sir. If patient is kept nilvarally only for a few hours or 1 day, like appendicectomy, cholecystectomy, we don't need to replace potassium.
At
body
all.
will
Yeah,
be
yeah,
able
agree.
to.
Agree.
But if you are maintaining nilvarally for more than 48 hours to 72 hours, then you have to replace, because this is the normal requirement. 60 milliequivalent is the normal potassium requirement for the body. So around 3 ampules, each ampule will contain 20 equivalents, and you need to give 3 ampules diluted in saline or 5% something.
In addition,
should never be given IV directly.
In addition, you have to check the potassium levels. If the potassium levels are low, you have to supplement as I gave the formula as I gave before.
Yes.
Niranjan, any questions?
Nothing, sir, nothing.
Postgraduates, any doubts? They're all silent. They're all enlightened.
Hello, sir. No, sir. Hello.
See, I think Pawan has touched on almost all topics except one. There is one more important thing. You should know when to stop, which is called de-escalation. Okay. So that is where that obligatory undernutrition and underhydration and all those concepts have come in. So there is a grave danger of patients going into overload if you keep on continuing the IV fluids without knowing when to stop it. That is also an important aspect where you should be aware as soon as the patient is able to take orally. You should at an appropriate time stop it or de-escalate as early as possible.
Correct. I think that's a very important point. I think Pawan has done very well. It is a good, you touched on most of the things, and
Sir,
well done.
around 4 to 5 slides are there, sir.
There,
Yes, sir.
what is it regarding?
That's regarding trauma management and burns.
I think you talked about it in the earlier part, no?
Yes,
It's
sir.
already 10:10.
It's already 10. I think we have touched upon it. And
3 slides, sir. That's also 3
No, it's
slides.
okay. Finished. It's okay. Don't worry, because everybody's attention span is gone.
Yes, sir.
You have touched upon it already. Anyway,
Yes, sir.
okay. I think we'll finish, sir.
Okay. Well done, Pawan.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Niranjan. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ramkrishna sir,
Thank you,
thank
sir.
you.